Welcome back to Field Archaeology 101. We're back in the lab today, and a lot of you people have been requesting to take a closer look at the fire pits because you want to hear the stories just like I do, like everyone wants to, and it's good to revisit your finds. It's good to revisit your fire pits. And one of the reasons why I display the way I do is I can keep going back, I can keep rethinking, I can keep looking at this stuff. So what I'm going to do is look at some specific fire pits. We're going to talk about patterns, what we see, directions we may want to think. In particular, I was looking at this fire pit, and I noticed a lot of things. I noticed that not just that there was bone present in the fire pit, but it was all pretty much the same size. Same color, same size. And beginning to read a lot of other papers that have been written, consulting with other archaeologists who are finding similar things and using equipment that we can't use, like spectrometers where they can look at the internal parts of a pot and look for elements to tell you what they were actually boiling in there. Animal fats, protein fats. Well, it seems now that a lot of the thinking on these bones is related to fat that they were trying to draw out of it or draw out of the animal, and then they could make all kinds of I want to say soap, but not soap. These are fats that they can use for cooking, for protein, for things that they need at a later date. So the uniformity of these, the size and the color that's popping up in my pits is so exactly like what's turning up around Lake Erie, little town north of us, Milan. Something to think about. Now look at this, where we're sitting right beside a fire pit, and we've got pottery. We've got different types of pottery with cord marks. Some of these they had an actual stick or a bone, and they would do it, or they would just pick up something and rub it on there to create patterns and things like that. Different cultures did different things. The Adena down on my site just worked with pretty much plain pottery. So a real quick overview of this says, well, we have 4 or 5 pieces here with cord marks. Are they related? And then the rest of them don't. Are they related to one another? You don't have to have answers to get you going down the right paths. One thing that was very stood out to me was the number of flakes of flint that are pretty much the same size, a little bit narrow, a little bit long, and we will at a later date talk about the difference between blades and knives and flake knives. But today I'm just going to call it to your attention that we have these knives that are right around the fire pit. We have bones. What were they doing? Were they cutting? Were they cutting up meat? Were they sawing bone? All good questions. So looking again for patterns, we just see that there was a lot of work going on, detailed work, by this fire pit. And the dominant piece here is Adena. How could other pots from other cultures end up in there? I used a term that was new to some of you the last time we talked, and that was called backfill. You've got a lot of people in one spot walking around. We're talking about a 1 acre site, 1/2 of 1 acre site where all these fire pits are occurring. And commonly we're finding a fire pit overlapping another fire pit, one on top of another, 3 of them, boom, 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 on top of each other. So you get people digging and moving and kicking, stuff gets moved around. So backfill for me is something that's not related to that pit that ended up in that pit. One particular fire pit with emphasis on cutting tools. Another fire pit, again a real quick overview of the pottery. You see a similar color, you see similar texture in almost all these, and after a while you'll learn that these are, because they're all related and mostly they're all the same pot. Now for me what's interesting, I read an article a while back in the early 70s that was written about this site, and they said they only found 1 pot and it was shell tempered pottery. Well, since then I've found many pots, and none of them were shell tempered. So you know, your information grows. I don't know the strength, the archaeological knowledge of the people who worked it originally, but I know what's right in front of me. This is another fire pit. And from what I can see here, I'm looking at particulars, pieces that this could be Hopewell, but these are definitely Archaic pieces. This is definitely Archaic. It's not Woodland, it's not late Woodland. Archaic, Archaic, Archaic. Some broken stuff, some shale, pottery, bone, and a little tiny flake blade or bladelet. And we were going to talk about this later. Most people just throw these away and they don't even consider small tools for small jobs. And these are abundant around some of the fire pits. But for me, quickly, as I see this, I look at it and say more than likely I'm dealing with an Archaic, late Archaic fire pit. I see a rim shard right here, and a rim, of course, is the top of the pot, and everything matches up with the Adena. So again, we have some backfill and we have another culture, the clash of two cultures with this fire pit. This was a really fun fire pit because I like diversity. I have a short attention span and I need a lot of things coming at me all at once. We have pottery, we have a rim shard, and this typically says Adena, Adena, Adena. And what we have discovered, and we aren't sure why, we have some ideas why, that we're finding steatite in some of these fire pits. This is obviously Adena, Adena points, probably a Woodland knife, and some steatite. And I just can't talk enough about it because this just doesn't show up in Ohio. Occasionally along the Ohio River, but not in the inland sites. So what looks like a glob of gray actually is soapstone, but it's got some cool things going on. Right here, if you can see this pathway, if I were to turn it here, you see it was a hole that was drilled in it. Well, why? Well, maybe this is the exterior point of the pot. It was broken and they tried to tie it, to hold it back together. As I keep looking at it, I see a hole right here where they started to drill another hole. Perforated, they just hadn't really bored it out yet. This is a side, this is a side of the steatite pottery. And what we do know is that there are some people that have seriously researched steatite. And I want to mention this fellow who lives along the East Coast, Rodney Peck. He has a wonderful book on steatite soapstone, the origins, the soap pits, and all the various things that they made out of soapstone, where they find it, how it was used. It seems to me that probably he's one of the more elite sources of information on it. You can Google his name and see what you come up with. I hope that you would add this to your library. Not expensive books, but these are rainy day, these are winter day materials that you can go to fill up some of your void time.